This is chapter 11, part 2, lecture video. Slide 11, United States versus Leon. Police got a warrant to search the homes of 2 drug dealers. On its face, the warrant was valid, but later it was found to lack probable cause. The evidence found, however, was still admitted because when the police executed the warrant, they did so in good faith. They believed it was a valid warrant. You could argue that one. Well, it was argued, actually. Slide 13, arrest warrants. Let's look at, instead of looking at the slide, let's look at page 326, which covers the content of the slide. Process to obtain an arrest warrant. Actually, let's look at page 325 at the bottom. Arrest warrants. For an arrest warrant, facts must be given to establish every element of each crime listed in the warrant. Additional information must be included to show that the person named is the one who committed the crime. The physical description, age, etc. Arrest warrant can be obtained based on DNA report. Let's look at page 326. Process to obtain an arrest warrant. Draft affidavits that contain facts to establish probable cause that the crime occurred. Must have probable cause that each element in the definition of the crime occurred. Probable cause that the person named in the arrest warrant committed the crime. Reasons why the judge should believe the information is true. Affidavit must be signed under penalty of perjury. Arrest warrant is prepared so it will be ready for the judge to sign. Present affidavits and draft arrest warrant to the judge. The judge may have the officer sworn in and ask for additional facts. If the judge is satisfied that the requirements for the warrant has been met, the judge will sign the warrant. The judge can change the crimes listed on the warrant that the officer has prepared. And the officers execute the arrest warrant once it's signed by the judge. Slide 14. Let's look at page 327 that covers these aspects on the slide. Page 327, second line, the affidavit must also convince the judge the facts are reliable. So this is the reliability of facts in an affidavit. If the officer making the affidavit observed the facts firsthand, the fact that the affidavit is made under oath is sufficient to establish reliability. Information provided by crime victims and eyewitnesses is usually assumed to be reliable unless there's a motive to falsify. Next paragraph. Informants who are themselves criminals create the biggest problem. Due to their past convictions or a bad motive for incriminating someone, they lack credibility. In Spinelli versus the United States, the Supreme Court established a rule that required applications for warrants to establish probable cause for the action sought, search or arrest, and separate probable cause that the informant is credible. Some states still follow this rule, but most have adopted the more lenient standard established in Illinois versus Gates. Next paragraph. When a warrant is sought in a state that follows Spinelli standards, facts stated in the affidavit must establish the reliability of the informant. All the way at the bottom of this page, page 327, confidential informants give police information on the condition that their names will not be revealed. Let's look at the top of page 328. This information can be used in a warrant without giving the name of the person who provided it. At a later time, the defendant may request the name of the informant, but the judge will require the police to disclose it only if the identity of the informant is crucial to the case. That's a McRae versus Illinois precedent. People whose identities are unknown are referred to as anonymous informants. Slide 15 talks about Illinois versus Gates, which was already mentioned. Slide 16, search warrants. The procedure is obtained from a neutral judge acting inside their jurisdiction. Felony warrants may be restricted to certain courts. Typically, the warrant is executed in daylight. The police are required to identify themselves. Execution of a warrant, page 329. Third paragraph. If facts in the warrant application support a request that the warrant be executed at night, the judge may designate it for night service. In that Lois Goodman case, that might be if you have to use a forensic technique that can only be done at night, such as luminol, blue star, where you have to have a completely dark room. Bottom of page 329, the last paragraph. Arrest warrants must be obtained before the statute of limitations expires on the crime in question. State laws establish how long an arrest warrant is valid. Most felony warrants are valid for 3 years. Warrants for murder may be indefinitely. Page 332. Execution of search warrants. A warrant directs a peace officer to take a specific action, search or make an arrest. This act of doing is called an execution of a warrant. Next paragraph. The officer executing the warrant is responsible for verifying that the warrant is valid on its face. This means that the warrant looks like it was legally issued and not expired. Next paragraph. Officers are expected to respect people's privacy, but are allowed to take reasonable precautions to protect themselves. This results in 5 requirements. 1. Absent an emergency or consent of the occupants, a warrant is required to enter a home. 2. Prior to entering a home, officers must comply with the knock and announce procedures. Knock, knock, knock. This is the police with a search warrant. 3. A protective sweep may be conducted for the safety of the officers immediately after entering a building. Protective sweep means they go from room to room and check for anybody who's hidden to make sure they're safe. 4. Searches may be restricted to the area described in the warrant, so they can do a sweep first and then search for evidence. 5. A return must be completed after the search and sent to the courthouse. That's called a receipt and inventory. It's a document that shows what they collected during the warrant. Slide 17, search warrants. Knock and notice. Let's look at page 333 instead of reading the slide. Page 333, knock and announce. Second paragraph, the proper knock and announce procedure requires 4 basic actions. 1, the police must knock or otherwise announce that they are there. 2, they must identify their official capacity that they're the police. 3, they must announce why they are there. We have a warrant for your arrest. 4, they must wait a reasonable amount of time for a response. Bottom of that paragraph, if no one responds, officers may resort to forced entry. 2 types of situations permit officers to enter without complying with the full knock and announce procedures. First, if there are explicit facts that indicate the officer's life or the life of someone else in the house may be in danger, immediate entry may be allowed. Next sentence, or skip down to another sentence. Similar exceptions are allowed if taking the time to comply is very likely to result in the destruction of evidence or the escape of a suspect. Bottom of this page, substantial compliance is permitted if the facts that develop while officers are given the appropriate announcements indicate, next page, that there is danger. This follows the same basic situations mentioned in the previous paragraph: danger to police, destruction of evidence, escape of a suspect, or danger to people in the house. Okay, let's look at slide 19. Where did I want to talk about that? Not yet. Okay. Slide 19, page 334, talks about protective sweeps. Protective sweep may expand search for security of police, limited to personal safety of officers. So page 334 talks about the sweep. You go through the house, make sure no one's hiding. It does not allow a search for evidence. It's to make sure, or a search in places where someone could not hide. It's a search for people for safety reasons. Restrictions on the search: may only look in locations that could contain evidence being searched for, limited to the area covered by the warrant, and the return is filed after the execution. So I already mentioned receipt and inventory is a document that lists everything that was collected. Also, dominion and control is often collected. That dominion and control shows it links a person to a address. Slide 20, exclusionary rule. Let's look at the middle of page 335 under exclusionary rule. Weeks versus the United States decided in 1914 that evidence obtained by federal agents in violation of the Fourth Amendment could not be used in federal court. The rule was not extended to the states until Mapp versus Ohio was decided in 1961. And that gets into the fruit of the poisonous tree. We'll talk about that in a second. Slide 20, defined evidence seized in an illegal search is not admissible against the party whose rights were violated. At first, we already talked about that. It was federal, now it states. The rationale is it deters unconstitutional behavior by the police and preserves judicial integrity.